So imagine someone who can completely dismantle your self-esteem, your entire sense of reality, and they do it without ever once raising their voice.
Right. Someone who weaponizes the fact that they cooked you dinner.
Exactly. Or someone who uses their own vulnerability, their tears, their physical ailments like an invisible leash.
Oh, absolutely. It's a tightening leash.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this and you have ever felt like you are just suffocating in a relationship with someone who the rest of the world thinks is an absolute saint, well, you are not crazy.
No, you're not. You're just trapped.
Right. You are trapped in a psychological operating system that is fundamentally designed to be completely invisible to the naked eye.
And it is the ultimate behavioral camouflage. In the world of profiling, we see predators of all kinds, Some just kick the door down. But the most dangerous ones, they already have a key.
Wow. Yeah.
They are already inside the house. And they got inside by convincing you that they're the ones who actually need your protection. So today, we are hunting the covert narcissist.
I'm so ready for this.
Yeah, our mission for this deep dive is to decode this invisible architecture. We are taking a massive stack of source material, deep clinical psychology, pathology, modern attachment theory, behavioral economics.
Oh, and the cutting-edge neurobiology, right.
Yeah.
Like Bessel van der Kolk and Stephen Porges.
Yes, exactly. We're going to synthesize all of that into an exact behavioral profile. And the promise here is that by the end of this investigation, you will recognize manipulation patterns that most people never see, even after decades of daily exposure.
Which is wild to think about, because as a clinical psychologist, I spend my life looking at personality pathology. And as a behavioral profiler who specializes in coercive control, you see the exact same things from a different angle.
I really do.
And between the two of us, we really want to expose a core paradox today.
Right.
When I say the word narcissist, almost everyone listening pictures the exact same overt phenotype.
Oh, yeah. The loud, arrogant, domineering boss.
Right. The person taking selfies, bragging about their income, demanding the best table at the restaurant.
They're steamrolling the conversation. They're a thunderstorm.
Yes, the thunderstorm. That's the overt, grandiose profile.
And honestly, from a profiling standpoint, that is an incredibly easy catch. They announce their pathology the second they walk into a room.
They really do.
Their grandiosity is just this massive neon target. They take up all the oxygen, so you see them coming a mile away. And more importantly, society generally recognizes them as problematic.
Right. We all agree that guy is a jerk.
Exactly. But the person we are analyzing today, they don't brag. They suffer.
Oh, that's such a good distinction.
They don't demand attention through dominance. They extract it through withdrawal. They completely weaponize self-sacrifice and martyrdom and fragility.
Which makes me think of Dr. Carol McBride's work. She's done this phenomenal foundational research on the daughters of narcissistic mothers. And she uses this analogy that just perfectly captures this dynamic.
Oh, the doll analogy, right.
Yeah, the vintage Chatty Cathy doll. So think about this doll. You look at her sitting on the shelf, and she looks absolutely perfect. She's got this beautiful vintage dress, a sweet painted-on smile.
The picture of an ideal companion.
Right, to the outside world, she's perfect. But when you actually try to engage with the doll, when you pull that string on her back, she only has a few pre-programmed phrases. She says, tell me a story. Or she says, brush my hair.
Look at me. Focus on me. Take care of me.
Yes. No matter how many times you pull the string, no matter how much emotional energy you pour into the interaction, the exchange is always, exclusively, about the doll.
There is zero reciprocity.
None. It is the flawless illusion of a relationship. And that is the exact behavioral profile of the covert narcissist. It's an illusion of intimacy that is entirely one-sided.
But it's wrapped in such a sweet, socially acceptable package.
Exactly. So you don't even realize you are being emotionally drained until you are just completely hollowed out.
And that is exactly where the cognitive dissonance begins for the victim. Because to understand how this predator operates, we have to look beneath that sweet exterior.
Right. I have to.
We have to examine the structural core of the pathology. And this is where the clinical literature provides a really clear map.
Yeah, because whether a narcissist is overt and grandiose or covert and vulnerable, they actually share the exact same underlying psychological architecture.
Right. Otto Kernberg was brilliant in mapping this out.
The psychiatrist, yeah.
Yeah, he defined the core of narcissism not as excessive self-love, which is what everyone assumes.
Right, the common misconception.
He defined it as an unstable, deeply fragmented self.
Because they lack internal cohesion.
Yeah.
A healthy human being has a solid core identity. You have a baseline sense of self-worth that stays pretty stable whether you get a promotion or get cut off in traffic.
Yeah, a bad day doesn't shatter your identity.
Exactly. But the narcissistic structure completely lacks that internal floor. They are psychologically fragmented.
So because they don't have an internal regulatory system for their own self-esteem, they have to outsource it.
Yes, they require constant, unending external regulation.
They literally need you to act as their emotional regulatory organ.
Oh, that's such a visceral way to put it.
But it's true. And the hallmark of this, the trait that makes them so dangerous, is a fundamental structural lack of genuine empathy for your separate existence.
Right.
To the covert narcissist, you are not a separate human being. You don't have your own inner life or your own complex needs or autonomy.
You're an appliance.
You're an appliance. You are a mirror.
Mm.
You exist solely to reflect back the image they need to see to keep their fragmented self from just shattering entirely.
I really want to look closely at the science backing this up, actually, because a lot of people mistake a covert narcissist sensitivity for empathy.
Oh, all the time.
They think, oh, my mother cries so easily, she must be highly empathetic. But there is a massive biological distinction we need to make here.
Okay, let's break that down.
Let's examine this fascinating cross-sectional study. It was done during the COVID-19 lockdown in Mexico. Researchers looked at 283 medical students.
That's a very specific cohort.
Very specific, yeah. They wanted to measure the relationship between covert narcissism and cognitive empathy in this highly stressed, isolated population.
And we should clarify the distinction there.
Right. Effective empathy is when you feel sad because someone else is crying. You catch the feeling.
Right.
But cognitive empathy is the structural ability of the brain to mentalize another person's perspective. It's the ability to actually understand why they are crying and what they might need, totally outside of your own experience.
And medical students are the perfect cohort for testing this, right? Because they are high achieving, they are deeply stressed, and they're operating in an environment where they are literally supposed to be learning advanced caregiving.
Exactly. So what did the data actually reveal when they mapped covert narcissistic traits against cognitive empathy?
I'm guessing it wasn't a positive correlation?
Not at all. The researchers found a highly significant inverse association.
Wow.
Yeah. As covert narcissistic traits went up, cognitive empathy plummeted.
Which means, neurologically speaking, the sensitive, fragile, easily wounded facade of the covert narcissist is a biological illusion.
Yes. Yes, they appear highly sensitive, but they are exclusively sensitive to themselves.
So they literally lack the cognitive architecture to step outside their own ego defense.
They can't do it. They cannot conceptualize your pain as something separate from their own narrative.
You know, let's actually pause right there.
Yeah.
I want to look at how this structural deficit manifests in real-world dialogue.
Oh, behavioral forensics. Let's do it.
Because this is where the camouflage is the thickest. Let's look at an everyday interaction. Imagine a daughter who has worked relentlessly for years, right? And she finally gets a major life-changing promotion at work.
Okay.
She comes home, her eyes are bright, she's practically vibrating with joy, and she shares the news with her mother.
A huge moment.
Huge. But the mother looks at her, and her face doesn't quite light up. She gives this tight, measured little smile, and she says, well, it's nice you accomplished that, but it's a shame you didn't do it sooner.
Oof. Okay, let's freeze that frame and unpack the invisible transaction happening right there.
Let's do it.
Because if the daughter complains about this interaction to a friend, someone who doesn't understand the pathology, that friend's going to say, well, what are you upset about? She said it was nice.
She acknowledged the accomplishment, you're just being too sensitive.
Right. On paper, the transcript looks completely benign.
But the behavioral profiler looks at what was actually meant and what power dynamic was just shifted.
Yes, what is the mother experiencing internally?
She's having an internal crisis. The daughter's success, her radiant joy, it actively threatens the mother's need to be the center of the universe.
It's a narcissistic injury.
Exactly. The mother feels this sudden, unbearable, hollow feeling, so she has to extract supply to regulate herself.
So the hidden translation of her sentence is really, your independent success threatens my superiority. I must immediately diminish your achievement to regulate my own fragile ego.
Yes, and the targeted emotional response is devastatingly precise. Think about what the mother wants the daughter to feel in that exact millisecond.
Guilt, inadequacy.
Deflation. She wants to literally watch the light extinguish in her daughter's eyes. because the exact millisecond the daughter's joy drops and her face falls in disappointment.
The mother's internal power is restored.
It is a literal energy transfer.
Wow. Yes, the daughter's self-esteem is siphoned out of her nervous system just to feed the parent's grandiosity.
And the genius of it is the deniability. I mean, the mother didn't yell, she didn't throw a plate against the wall, she just offered a helpful critique.
Just a little feedback, right?
Right.
This insidious, quiet nature of the abuse is exactly why we have a massive ongoing debate in the clinical diagnostic world right now.
Oh, with the DSM-5.
Yes. If you look at the DSM-5, the diagnostic manual we psychologists use, the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder focus incredibly heavily on the overt traits.
Right, the grandiosity, the visible arrogance.
The active need for admiration, exploitative behavior. The manual was historically shaped to identify people who cause visible problems in society. You know, the ones committing fraud, destroying corporations, ending up in the criminal justice system.
Which means the covert narcissist evades formal clinical diagnosis almost entirely.
Entirely.
They just fly completely under the radar of the DSM-5.
Exactly. Which is why dimensional models, like the brilliant work of Jonathan Shedler and Theodore Millon, are so vital for clinicians to study today.
Because dimensional models look at it differently.
Yeah, they don't just check off a list of loud, observable behaviors. They look at the underlying personality organization. They look at the defensive structures.
They look at how the person regulates their self-esteem.
Right. And when you apply a dimensional model, the covert narcissist lights up like a Christmas tree. But without it, they just look like a depressed, anxious victim of circumstance.
You know, from a profiling perspective, I have to admit genuine awe at how evolutionarily effective this camouflage is.
It's adapted perfectly.
It really has. The covert narcissist has perfectly adapted to a modern society that rightly punishes overt arrogance, but deeply rewards, protects, and coddles the performance of humility and victimhood.
They have completely hacked the social contract.
They really have. And when you realize they have hacked the social contract, you start to understand their primary hidden motivation and their ultimate power objective.
Right, because this isn't just about making snide, passive-aggressive comments to ruin a dinner party.
No, this is a highly sophisticated system of absolute control. And to understand the mechanics of this control, we have to explore a concept known as instrumental caregiving.
Oh, this is a huge one.
Instrumental caregiving is one of the most chilling manipulation systems I've ever analyzed because it perverts the very foundation of human connection.
Because normally when we think of caregiving, we think of altruism.
Right. We think of a parent cooking meals for their child, paying for their college tuition, sewing their Halloween costumes, driving them to endless soccer practices.
We view that as love.
But in the covert narcissistic system, this physical, logistical, instrumental care is completely devoid of emotional attunement.
It's totally empty.
It is provided strictly as leverage. It is calculated down payment. The parent is actively purchasing future emotional caretaking and compliance from the child.
Which fundamentally changes the entire nature of childhood. The child isn't a human being raised. The child is an investment being managed.
Exactly. And this leads to one of the most explosive escalation points in the relationship, the presentation of the invisible invoice.
The ledger.
The meticulous, silent, deeply detailed ledger. The covert parent keeps track of every single sacrifice they've ever made, every dollar spent, every hour driven, every meal cooked.
And when do they cash it in?
They present this invisible invoice for payment at a very specific developmental milestone. It's the exact moment the adult child attempts to individuate.
Because individuation is the ultimate threat.
The ultimate threat. The moment the child tries to move out of state or set a boundary around their time or prioritize a new spouse over the parent, that is when the invoice is dropped on the table.
Let's break down exactly how this sounds. Let's look at another scenario.
Okay.
The adult child calls their mother and says, "Mom, I'm so exhausted from work. I can't come over for Sunday dinner this week. I just need a day to rest in my own apartment."
A completely normal, healthy boundary.
Right. Now, the mother doesn't scream. Instead, she lets out a heavy, trembling sigh. A sigh that carries the weight of the world.
Oh, I can hear it.
And she says softly, "Well, after everything I've sacrificed for you, all those late nights working 2 jobs to pay for your braces, this is how I am cast aside. It's fine. You rest. I'll just be here, alone."
Okay, let's run the behavioral forensics on that response. On the surface, what was said?
It's a statement of historical fact, right? She did work 2 jobs.
Yes, mixed with a presentation of profound emotional injury and passive acceptance.
But the invisible transaction, what was actually meant, is a brutal assertion of ownership.
The translation is, You owe me your autonomy.
Your independence is a direct violation of our contract. You must pay for your childhood survival with your current emotional freedom. Your rest is a betrayal.
And look at the power shift that occurs in that 10-second phone call.
It's massive.
The parent completely regains total, suffocating control of the dynamic without ever raising their voice. They didn't threaten violence. They didn't issue an ultimatum.
They simply weaponize the child's own natural empathy and biological guilt against them.
So the child hangs up the phone, feels physically sick with guilt, cancels their plans to rest, and goes to Sunday dinner.
The invoice is paid.
Paid in full.
To really ground this, I want to bring in a layered case study from the clinical side. Let's look at a woman I'll call Ruth.
Okay.
Ruth is 55 years old. She's a librarian, a highly respected community leader, someone who gives back constantly. Growing up, Ruth's mother was a pillar of their small town.
The classic martyr figure.
Exactly. Her mother made all of Ruth's clothes by hand. Her mother volunteered at every single school bake sale, led the Girl Scout troop, organized the church choir.
So the entire outside world looked at Ruth's mother and saw a literal saint.
A saint.
Okay.
A martyr who lived entirely for her family.
But if we run a diagnostic on Ruth's internal reality, what was actually happening inside that house?
Ruth described her childhood as feeling like she was suffocating at the bottom of a dark, windowless well. Yeah. Her mother's care was completely invasive and conditionally tied to absolute compliance. If Ruth showed any spark of independence, if she wanted to quit piano to play softball, or if she wanted to spend time with friends instead of sitting with her mother, the mother wouldn't get angry.
What would she do?
She would collapse. She would weep uncontrollably, clutching her chest, asking God where she went wrong, asking Ruth why she was so cruel to a mother who literally gave up her own dreams to sew her dresses.
Oh, that is so heavy.
And this dynamic creates what we call epistemic damage.
Epistemic damage, that's a profound concept. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, right? How we know what is real and true.
Exactly. So epistemic damage is the destruction of a person's ability to trust their own perception of reality.
So imagine being Ruth.
Right, imagine it. Every teacher, every pastor, every neighbor tells you, your mother is an angel. You are so lucky to have the perfect mother.
But your physical body feels panicked, drained, and chronically tense every single time you are in the same room as her.
Because the outside world's narrative contradicts your internal biological reality, you do the only thing a child can do. You gaslight yourself.
You internalize the discrepancy.
Yes. Ruth decided, if my mother is a saint, and I feel resentment toward her, then I must be a monster. There must be something fundamentally broken, ungrateful, and evil inside my core.
And that is the terrifying genius of the covert strategy. They don't just abuse the victim, they manipulate the environment so perfectly that the victim willingly internalizes the blame for the abuse.
Predator remains spotless.
And as dark as that is, the pathology can escalate even further. Because if we follow this insatiable need for pity, attention, and supply to its absolute most extreme power objective, we cross the threshold into something truly chilling.
I know where you're going with this.
We enter the realm of Munchausen by proxy.
Yes, which is increasingly being conceptualized in the literature as narcissism by proxy.
Right. This is the darkest, most dangerous behavioral extension of the covert profile. We are talking about a caregiver who will literally fabricate, exaggerate, or actively induce severe physical illness in their own child or dependent.
The psychological leap here is staggering to most people. To go from sewing dresses to intentionally poisoning a child or suffocating them to induce sleep apnea alarms, it requires a complete detachment from the child's humanity.
It does. But if you understand the covert operating system, it is a perfectly logical progression.
How so?
The parent discovers that a sick child is the ultimate endless well of narcissistic supply. I mean, think about the mechanics of it. The child is hospitalized. Suddenly, the parent is thrust right into the center of a high-drama environment.
Right.
Highly educated doctors are consulting them, treating them as a vital partner in care. The community pours casseroles, GoFundMe donations, admiration, and profound pity onto the parent.
Look at how brave she is. Look at how devoted she is, sleeping in that uncomfortable hospital chair for weeks.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the child is kept physically weakened, utterly dependent, and socially isolated from peers who might actually help them develop autonomy.
It is the absolute total capture of narcissistic supply.
The parent gets to wear the crown of the ultimate tragic saint while actively, methodically destroying the child's physical health to maintain the narrative.
The cognitive dissonance required by the parent to sit by the bed and weep for the nurses, knowing they literally injected insulin into the child's FEV line an hour prior, is the purest manifestation of a fragmented empathy void core.
It is deeply unsettling, but it forces us to ask a structural question, how does a family system even function day to day under this kind of dark operating system?
Right, because this isn't just one relationship, it's an entire ecosystem that the narcissist controls.
So we have to look at the developmental origins and the way the narcissist organizes the people around them.
To understand the family dynamics, we have to introduce a psychological mechanism defined by the psychoanalyst Melanie Klein. It's called projective identification.
Okay, let's get into this.
Now, I want to be incredibly precise here, because projection is a common term. Normal projection is something we all do mildly.
Right, like you have a stressful day at work, you come home in a bad mood.
And you assume your spouse is angry at you, even though they're just quietly reading.
Yeah.
You project your internal state outward.
But projective identification is not just a misperception.
No, it is an aggressive, compulsive, highly manipulative, interpersonal defense mechanism.
So remember that the narcissist has a fragmented self, right?
Yes. And inside that fragment are feelings they absolutely cannot tolerate. Deep, annihilating shame, severe inadequacy, aggressive rage, self-hatred.
If they were to consciously acknowledge these feelings, their ego would literally collapse into psychosis.
So to survive, they split these bad feelings off. They separate them from their conscious identity, and they project them outward onto their children.
But here is the critical difference. They don't just imagine the child has these traits.
No, they actively manipulate, unconsciously provoke, and relentlessly induce the child to actually act out these exact traits.
They force the target to identify with the projection. So if the narcissistic parent feels deep internal chaos, they will covertly poke, prod, and gaslight the child until the child has a massive emotional meltdown.
Exactly. And then the parent can sit back, look completely calm, and say, "Look how unstable and chaotic my child is. It's so hard dealing with their mental health issues."
The parent has successfully evacuated their own chaos into the child's body.
And this mechanism is exactly how rigid roles get allocated within the narcissistic family system. The parent projects their split-off parts onto different children, creating two primary, heavily researched roles.
The scapegoat and the golden child.
Yes. Let's profile the golden child first.
Okay, because the parent has good split-off parts as well, right? Unrealized fantasies of grandeur, perfection, superiority.
Yes. And they project these onto the golden child. This child becomes the designated container for the parent's idealized self.
And here is a massive, incredibly damaging misconception that we need to destroy right now. If you ask anyone on the street, or even some poorly trained therapists who has it worse in a toxic family system, almost everyone assumes it's the scapegoat.
Right, because the scapegoat is the one constantly getting blamed, punished, yelled at. It looks like the most abusive role.
But advanced clinical research and trauma therapy reveal a deeply counterintuitive truth.
The golden child is often the most severely, insidiously traumatized individual in the entire system.
Let's break down why. Because the trauma of the golden child is completely invisible. The golden child is groomed for supply from birth. They are deeply, profoundly enmeshed with the narcissistic parent.
They have no psychological boundary between where they end and the parent begins.
The pediatrician and psychoanalyst D.W. Winnicott coined a term that perfectly describes the golden child's fate.
The false self.
The false self.
Yeah.
The golden child realizes at a pre-verbal instinctual level that they are not loved for who they actually are. They are not loved for their authentic essence.
They are loved exclusively for what they produce. Good grades, athletic trophies, absolute compliance, physical attractiveness.
And primarily their ability to make the parent look magnificent to the outside world.
So to survive and secure attachment, they must metaphorically murder their true, authentic self and construct a flawless, high-performing, false self.
They become a human doing rather than a human being.
Yes, their entire existence is conditional. They suffer from crippling, silent performance anxiety.
They know, deep in their nervous system, that if they drop the ball, if they get a C on a test, or if they disagree with the parent,
They will lose the parent's love instantly and face total emotional annihilation. They live on a razor's edge of perfectionism.
Now compare that to the structural reality of the scapegoat. The scapegoat is the designated container for all the parent's toxic waste. The shame, the failure, the aggression.
They are the constant target of Darvia.
Let's explain Darva quickly for the context of this dynamic.
Right. Deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender.
It is the signature algorithmic response of an abuser when confronted.
Yes. If the scapegoat tries to set a boundary and says, "Mom, it really hurt my feelings when you compared my weight to my sister's," the covert mother deploys Darvo instantly.
She denies it. I never said that. You're imagining things.
She attacks. "You are always so overly sensitive and looking for ways to be cruel to me."
And she reverses victim and offender. I was just trying to be a helpful mother, but you always twist my words to abuse me. I am actually the victim of your constant bullying.
The scapegoat is subjected to this maddening reality distortion constantly.
But here's the fascinating twist about the scapegoat role from a profiling perspective. Because they are pushed to the outside of the family system, because they are actively rejected,
They survive.
they don't just survive. They're often the only ones who escape the system with their actual core identity intact.
Wow.
Because they were never afforded the conditional, suffocating love that the golden child received, they have absolutely no incentive to maintain a false self.
The parent's rejection ironically sets them free.
They often develop a fierce, unshakable sense of justice, they rebel against the insane rules of the system, and eventually they walk away.
The trauma they carry is horrific, but they fundamentally know who they are. The golden child often doesn't even know what their favorite color is because they only like what the parent likes.
You know, this dynamic brings up an incredibly important nuance that we see in clinical practice all the time. What happens when you introduce neurodivergence into this highly rigid, manipulative family system?
Oh, this is such a critical point. What if one of the children has autism or ADHD?
It is a massive systemic collision. A neurodivergent child operates on a totally different neurological wavelength. They often process communication literally.
Right. Oh.
They fundamentally fail to pick up on the unwritten, highly manipulative, passive-aggressive subtext of the household.
So if the covert mother is sighing heavily, acting like a martyr while doing the dishes, expecting the child to run over, soothe her, and take over the chore,
The neurodivergent child might just hear her breathing heavily, take it as a literal data point, and go right back to playing with their Legos.
which the covert narcissist interprets not as a neurological difference, but as a massive, intentional, malicious threat to their control.
Exactly. The parent's invisible manipulation tactic is failing. The neurodivergent child inadvertently exposes the fact that the parent is not omnipotent.
And because the child won't play the subtle game, they practically guarantee that they will be violently cast into the role of the scapegoat.
The covert parent will label them as difficult, broken, lacking empathy, or impossible to manage.
And then the parent will play the martyr to the community about how hard it is to raise this defective child, completely blind to the fact that the child is simply immune to their covert psychological warfare.
This brings us to a major perspective shift in our investigation. We have to pivot away from just psychological theory and family systems and look at the literal behavioral forensics of the body.
Because everything we've discussed so far, the gaslighting, the projective identification, the Darvo, it doesn't just result in bad memories or hurt feelings.
No, we are talking about severe, long-term physiological rewiring. We have to look at the unconscious drivers and the somatic consequences for the victims.
And this is where we cross into neurobiology. We have to examine this through the lens of Dr. Stephen Porges and his groundbreaking polyvagal theory.
If you want to understand why victims of covert abuse can't just get over it, you have to understand the vagus nerve.
Polyvagal theory fundamentally changed how we treat trauma. The vagus nerve is this massive wandering nerve highway that connects the brain stem directly to the body's major organs, the heart, the lungs, the gut.
It controls our autonomic nervous system.
And according to Porges, humans have a biological imperative called neuroception. Before our conscious brain even registers a thought, our nervous system is scanning the environment for safety or danger.
And a child is biologically hardwired for pure evolutionary survival to seek cues of safety in a caregiver's face, their vocal prosody, and their eyes.
It's called the social engagement system.
But look at what happens when that biological system interacts with a covert narcissist. The data streams mismatch.
Exactly. The covert parent's words, the cognitive data stream might say, "I love you so much, you are my whole world, I sacrifice everything for you."
But their face is completely rigid. Their eyes are dead. Their vocal tone is flat, icy, and passive-aggressive.
Their micro-expressions constantly leak contempt, disgust, or underlying rage.
So the child's nervous system is receiving two completely conflicting streams of data simultaneously.
The words say love and safety, but the ancient survival-driven vagus nerve is screaming lethal danger.
And when a child is exposed to this profound mismatch day after day, year after year, a terrifying systemic glitch occurs.
The victim's nervous system is systematically trained to associate connection itself with danger.
Intimacy, vulnerability, and love become terrifying concepts because in their developmental environment, intimacy was always the site of unpredictable emotional annihilation.
Which perfectly explains Dr. Daniel Siegel's concept of the window of tolerance.
The optimal neurobiological zone of arousal, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
In this window, you can experience stress without completely freaking out, and you can feel sadness without entirely shutting down.
But for the victim of chronic covert narcissistic abuse, this window structurally shrinks down to the size of a pinhole.
Because they have never, ever had a safe baseline. They don't know what peace feels like. So as adults, they oscillate violently outside the window.
They bounce between hyperarousal, which is panic, extreme anxiety, a racing heart, and constant hypervigilant scanning of the environment for threats.
And hyperarousal, which is the dorsal vagal shutdown response. Numbness, dissociation, chronic fatigue, literally collapsing inward.
And the body keeps the score, as Bessel van der Kolk says. The trauma manifests somatically. Let's look at the somatic echoes of this abuse through a case study. Let's look at Nicole.
Okay, Nicole. Nicole is a 34-year-old corporate lawyer. On paper, she's incredibly successful, razor-sharp, and driven.
But physically, she is an absolute wreck.
She has chronic, painful tension knots in her neck and jaw that massage therapy cannot touch. Her shoulders are perpetually hunched forward, curling over her chest.
As if she is unconsciously, physically trying to make herself a smaller target to avoid being hit.
Yes, she suffers from severe, unexplained gastrointestinal issues, irritable bowel syndrome, chronic nausea.
Her conscious mind is litigating million-dollar contracts, but her autonomic nervous system is stuck in a chronic 24/7 state of defensive mobilization.
She's physically bracing for an invisible attack that her body believes could come at any second.
And when she interacts with people, what is her psychological defense mechanism? How does she survive in the boardroom or in relationships?
She uses the fawn response.
Let's profile the fawn response deeply. This is based on the incredible work of Pete Walker regarding complex PTSD.
Most people understand the basic trauma responses, fight, flight, and freeze. But when you are trapped in a system with a covert narcissist, none of those work.
Right, you cannot fight them because they will instantly darva you, play the victim, and destroy your reputation.
You cannot flee because you are a dependent child or financially trapped.
You cannot freeze because the covert narcissist demands active emotional mirroring and interaction.
So you are forced to utilize the fourth trauma response, fawn. Fawning is the compulsive, highly attuned need to appease, accommodate, and constantly anticipate the emotional needs of others.
It is often mislabeled as simple people-pleasing.
But calling it people-pleasing is almost insulting. It makes it sound like a gentle personality quirk, like being overly polite.
The fawn response is an elite, highly sophisticated trauma survival strategy. It is psychological espionage.
The victim learns to preemptively scan the narcissist's mood the second they walk in the room. They completely abandon their own internal needs and instantly mold their personality into whatever shape will pacify the predator and prevent an attack.
And the absolute tragedy of the fawn response is that it acts like a homing beacon for future abusers.
Oh, absolutely.
When that traumatized child grows up and enters the dating pool or enters a corporate workplace, manipulative personalities can practically smell the fawn response on them.
The predator sees a person who will instinctively abandon their own boundaries to keep the peace. It makes them the perfect, endlessly exploitable source of new narcissistic supply.
Which brings us to one of the most profound psychological mysteries in clinical practice. It is the question I get asked most often by friends or family members of victims.
That's the question.
They look at someone like Nicole, a brilliant, capable, financially independent lawyer who's being suffocated by a covertly abusive partner or parent, and they ask with total genuine confusion, if it is so terrible, if you are being so abused, why is it so hard for you to just walk away?
That is the million-dollar question. And if you don't understand the answer, you will end up victim blaming.
Right.
The answer is trauma bonding. This isn't a psychological weakness. It isn't a lack of willpower. It is a literal addiction to the trap.
Let's dive into the neuroscience of this, drawing heavily on Patrick Kahn's research on trauma bonds. It all comes down to a behavioral conditioning mechanism called intermittent reinforcement.
Think about a slot machine in a casino. If a slot machine paid out a jackpot every single time you pulled the lever, you would quickly get bored. It's predictable.
Conversely, if it never ever paid out, you would walk away after 5 minutes.
But because it pays out completely unpredictably, you never know if the next pull is the winner, you become glued to the stool. Your brain becomes obsessed with the unpredictability.
The covert narcissist operates exactly like a rigged emotional slot machine. They do not abuse you 100% of the time. If they did, you would leave.
Instead, they unpredictably alternate between warmth and withdrawal. One day, they give you a rare, seemingly genuine compliment. They show a flash of the perfect partner or the loving mother.
You get a massive hit of dopamine.
The next day, for absolutely no logical reason, they plunge you into a cold, passive-aggressive silent treatment. Your cortisol and adrenaline spike. You are terrified.
This unpredictability creates a biochemical cocktail in the brain that is neurologically identical to a severe gambling addiction or even heroin dependence.
And this leads to a massive realization for anyone trying to heal. When the victim finally tries to leave, or when they are sitting alone in their apartment, deeply missing the abuser, they are not actually missing the person.
They're experiencing a brutal biochemical withdrawal.
Their brain is screaming for the dopamine hit to neutralize the cortisol. They are craving the relief of the anxiety ending.
They literally need the abuser to soothe the exact panic that the abuser intentionally caused. It is a closed-loop addiction cycle.
That insight changes everything. But we have to zoom out even further, because this abuse doesn't happen in a vacuum. We have to look at the societal and cultural implications.
Why does society enable this specific profile so effectively?
Because the covert narcissist wears cultural camouflage. Specifically, we have to look at the patriarchal martyr-mother trope.
Well, this is a huge factor.
Our culture has a deeply ingrained, highly toxic narrative that rewards women who completely erase their own identities for their families. We structurally equate absolute self-sacrifice with pure maternal love.
Exactly. If a mother stands up at a PTA meeting and says, I gave up my entire life, my career, my body, and my sanity for my children, I have nothing left for myself, society gives her a standing ovation.
But the covert narcissist weaponizes that exact societal trope. They use the highly sanctioned, socially protected role of the selfless martyr to completely mask profound entitlement, toxic enmeshment, and absolute coercive control.
It is the ultimate cover story. If the suffocated adult child tries to complain to a pastor, a therapist, or a relative, society immediately gaslights them.
How dare you speak about your mother that way? Look at everything she sacrificed for you. She's a saint.
This specific cultural dynamic creates a highly localized phenomenon. You see it every year.
Yes, I call it the Hallmark search.
Yeah.
Happens every year, usually the first week of May. Thousands of adult daughters and sons of covert narcissistic mothers walk into a pharmacy to buy a Mother's Day card.
And they wander the card aisle, picking up card after card, reading them and putting them back.
And slowly, they start crying right there in the aisle.
Because every single card says something to the effect of, to my rock, my safe harbor, my best friend, the woman who loved me unconditionally and supported all my dreams.
Exactly. Every card celebrates a culturally idealized, unconditional maternal love that they never, ever experienced. They are desperately searching for a card that fits their reality.
A card that says, thank you for the instrumental caregiving you provided while simultaneously suffocating my authentic self and making me responsible for your emotional regulation.
But Hallmark obviously doesn't manufacture that card. So they stand in the aisle, overwhelmed by what the researcher Pauline Boss calls ambiguous grief.
Ambiguous grief, grieving someone who is still physically alive.
Yes. They are grieving the profound loss of a relationship that appears completely intact and healthy to the outside world, but is completely hollow, dead, and transactional on the inside. It is an incredibly lonely type of mourning.
And if we are talking about society enabling the abuser and isolating the victim, we have to discuss the ultimate escalation point: institutional betrayal.
What happens when a victim of a covert narcissist, let's say a spouse who has finally broken the trauma bond, actually tries to escape the system legally?
They end up in family court. And this is where the nightmare compounds.
The family court system, structurally and educationally, is categorically unequipped to handle covert narcissism.
The entire legal paradigm is built on prioritizing co-parenting, collaboration, and equal access. The assumption is that two reasonable people are just having a disagreement.
But you cannot co-parent with a coercive controller. You cannot collaborate with someone whose entire psychological architecture is dedicated to destroying your reality.
When the victim, who is likely suffering from severe CPTSD, tries to set boundaries to protect themselves and their children, or tries to explain the insidious, invisible nature of the psychological abuse to a judge,
The covert narcissist executes their masterpiece.
the narcissist sits in the courtroom. They don't look angry. They wear a modest, conservative outfit. They look incredibly sad.
They cry softly, respectfully when the judge speaks.
They look at the judge and say with a trembling voice, "Your Honor, I just love my kids so much. I just want to see them. I have no idea why my ex is being so hostile and trying to keep them from me. I just want peace."
And the judge looks over at the victim. The victim is hyper-aroused, panicked. Their nervous system is totally dysregulated from being in the same room as their abuser. Their voice is shaking with anger and fear.
And the judge, misinterpreting the trauma response, labels the victim as hostile, uncooperative, or alienating.
The institution legally mandates that the victim drop their boundaries and actively collaborate with their abuser. It is a devastating secondary trauma that legally traps them in the abuse cycle for another decade.
It is a systemic failure of massive proportions. But we cannot leave our listeners sitting in that darkness. We promised them an operating manual.
Yes, we have spent the last 45 minutes profiling the predator, analyzing the underlying architecture, exploring the neurobiology, and exposing the societal traps.
Now we need to transition into tactical defense. If you cannot escape them immediately, or if you have to co-parent with them, how do you protect your nervous system? How do you become invisible to the predator?
We have to rely on extinction theory from behavioral psychology. Extinction theory dictates that if a behavior is no longer reinforced, it will eventually die out.
Remember, the core of the covert narcissist is that they require external regulation. They feed on your emotional reaction. That reaction is their narcissistic supply.
And this is critical. They do not care if the supply is positive or negative. It does not matter if you are crying, screaming in anger, pleading for them to understand you, or desperately defending your character.
Any emotional reaction proves to them that they still have power over your internal state. They control your thermostat. So the only tactical defense is to completely starve them of supply.
You have to cut off the fuel line. And the most famous, heavily prescribed tactic for this in the survivor community is called the gray rock method.
The goal of the gray rock method is right in the name. You want to make yourself as boring, dull, lifeless, and uninteresting as a gray rock sitting in a driveway.
When the narcissist looks at you, they should see nothing shiny, nothing emotional, nothing they can extract.
The golden rule of gray rocking is an acronym, JADE. You must never justify, argue, defend, or explain yourself to a narcissist.
Never. Because they are not arguing with you to reach a mutual understanding or to find the truth. They're arguing with you to exhaust your nervous system and extract supply.
If you try to defend your reality, you are just handing them ammunition to twist and use against you. So you stop playing the game, you give flat, monotone, one-word answers. Yes, no, okay, I see.
You show absolutely no facial expression. You
Mhm.
give them zero emotional data to latch onto.
Right.
Okay, wait. I have to jump in here because as a clinical psychologist who treats severe trauma, I have to firmly push back on the universal application of the gray rock method.
Really? I mean, it's the standard defense protocol.
It is, and it is highly effective for short-term superficial interactions. If you are dealing with a toxic coworker at the water cooler or a stranger on the internet, absolutely, gray rock them.
But not for close relationships.
No. If you are dealing with a parent you have to see regularly or a highly litigious ex-spouse you are forced to co-parent with, and you happen to be a highly sensitive person, and HSP gray rocking can actually be incredibly dangerous to your own long-term physical and mental health.
Why? Because of the sheer amount of emotional suppression required to pull it off.
Exactly. We have a saying in trauma therapy, repression is not regulation. An HSP, by definition, feels things in high definition. Their nervous system processes emotional data deeply.
So they can't just shut it off.
No. If an HSP mother is standing on the sidelines of a Little League soccer game and her covert narcissistic ex-husband walks up and starts subtly, passively, aggressively jabbing her, insulting her parenting.
And she forces herself to stand there, locking down her face, playing the cold, emotionless gray rock.
She is literally swallowing all of that toxic radioactive energy. She is violently suppressing her deep, authentic human emotions.
And that energy has to go somewhere.
It goes straight into her body. Over time, that chronic internalized toxicity and suppression leads to severe physical illness, autoimmune flare-ups, chronic fatigue, or massive private emotional meltdowns behind closed doors where the kids might see.
It feels like a fundamental betrayal of her own humanity to act that cold and dead inside.
Exactly.
That makes perfect sense neurologically. The defensive mechanism essentially becomes its own internal prison. So from a behavioral profiling standpoint, what is the alternative evolution of this tactic? How does an HSP protect themselves without destroying their own core?
We teach a modified evolution called the Yellow Rock method. Yellow Rock is the alternative for people who cannot, or ethically should not, completely shut down their warm emotional core.
How does yellow rock differ from gray rock behaviorally in a real-world interaction?
Yellow Rock is firm, but it is polite. It is respectful without ever being reactive. You aren't acting cold and dead. You maintain a warm human exterior, but you have an absolute impenetrable steel boundary sitting just underneath the surface.
Let's do a line-by-line behavioral forensic analysis on a text message exchange to clearly demonstrate the difference between the two tactics.
Okay, let's set up the scenario. The covert narcissist mother sends a text message to her adult daughter. The daughter recently set a boundary and said she couldn't host the massive family Thanksgiving dinner this year because she just had a baby and is exhausted.
Okay, so the mother sends this text. I guess I'm just the absolute worst mother in the world. I ruin everything for you. I'll just sit here alone in my empty house and die by myself while you enjoy your friends.
That is classic textbook covert guilt induction. It's an emotional hand grenade. Now, the strict gray rock response to that text message would be to type.
Okay. Which functionally is highly effective at cutting off supply. It gives the mother absolutely nothing to argue with.
True. But to an HSP daughter, sending a cold, one-word okay to her own mother, who is actively expressing suicidal ideation or profound despair, even if the daughter rationally knows it's a manipulation tactic, feels horrifyingly callous.
Sending that text causes the daughter massive internal distress and guilt. It dysregulates her.
Right. So how does she yellow rock that grenade?
Ow.
The daughter replies with something like, I hear your concern, I'll give that some thought. Or, I'm sorry you are feeling so sad today. We can talk about Thanksgiving later when things are a bit calmer.
Let's profile the outcome of that yellow rock response. Look at what happens to the daughter. She remains completely grounded. She gets to act in alignment with her own core values of kindness, empathy, and politeness. She doesn't feel like a monster.
But look at what she didn't do. She completely blocked the invisible transaction.
Exactly. She didn't apologize for canceling Thanksgiving. She didn't instantly offer to change her plans and host the dinner to soothe her mother.
She didn't engage in a frantic, exhausting argument about whether or not her mother is actually the worst mother in the world.
She acknowledged the communication as a polite human being, validated her own boundary, and entirely starved the narcissist of the chaotic, desperate emotional reaction they were trying to extract.
It is a masterful, elite-level diffusion tactic. You are essentially neutralizing the threat, letting the grenade detonate in an empty room, while maintaining your own psychological integrity and keeping your nervous system completely regulated.
Which brings us to the profound, incredibly complex synthesis of this entire journey. We have pulled apart the machinery of the covert narcissist.
But for everyone listening right now who has recognized their mother, their spouse, their co-parent, or their boss in this profile, you have to realize that healing requires you to embrace what we call the both-and framework.
Human beings naturally want black and white. We want heroes and villains. We want good or evil.
But surviving and healing from this specific type of invisible abuse requires the psychological maturity to hold two seemingly contradictory truths in your mind at the exact same time.
If you are listening to this and your reality has just been validated, you must hold two truths at once. They may have genuinely loved you in the absolute only way their fragmented, traumatized self knew how.
And their love was highly abusive, conditional, and deeply damaging to your soul.
You can deeply, profoundly grieve the loss of the healthy relationship you deserved but never got.
And you can set a rigid steel boundary to save your own life. You do not have to hate them to protect yourself from them. You just have to see them clearly.
And true protection ultimately means turning the spotlight around and examining the psychological debris they left behind inside of you. I want to challenge the listener to turn this profiling inward.
Look at your own internal architecture. Look at your own false self.
How much of your current relentless drive, your crushing perfectionism, your chronic anxiety, or your desperate need to people-pleaser is actually just an ancient survival strategy.
A corrupted program installed by a covert operator decades ago to keep you compliant.
That is the lingering, unresolved question we want to leave you with today. We've spent this entire deep dive giving you the behavioral forensics to spot the covert narcissist in the wild. We've given you the tools to see through the camouflage and recognize the invisible undertow.
But if you were raised in a family system that demanded you murder your true identity and construct a false self just to survive childhood, how much of the narcissist operating system is currently running quietly in the background of your own mind?
And more importantly,
Now that you can finally see the invisible strings, are you ready to cut them?